1. So I'm a 33-year-old male, and I work for the blue store with the yellow spark, and have for 10 years, starting as an overnight temp, but now work for the online department of a different store, mainly because it was closer to my at-the-time fiancé than the hour-long drive it would have taken one way. I had been working in the bakery and deli department, and as many know, the store closes the deli department at around 9 p.m. or so, to give the associates time to get the department cleaned for the morning crew the next day. As it was well before the pandemic by a good 5 or 6 years, the store only had one day where the doors were not open to anyone, Christmas. Back then, the store I had moved to was a 24-hour store, as opposed to the smaller one I started in, only open between 6 a.m. and midnight. The new store, which is the one I still work in, would be closed to the public by 8 p.m. Christmas Eve, and wouldn't reopen to the public until 6 a.m. the day after Christmas. Reasonable enough to allow the associates to spend time with their families on one day of the year. This particular Christmas Eve, I was working the closing shift at the deli, 11:15 to 8:15 that night, and as we got to 6 p.m. we closed our department. Standard procedure was to have one person in the back to wash the pans and cooking components on the hot side. One person would clean the hot side, hotcakes, fryer, and rotisserie oven, and the rest, usually 2 or 3, would clean the slicers on the cold cut side. It was going on almost 7:45, the announcement that we were closing soon emitting from the PA system. AP, that's Asset Protection, was stationed near the doors to start turning people away as we closed. And I was busy cleaning up one of the slicers. I believe it was the messiest of all of them, the cheese slicer. Seriously, the cheese residue from a day's use is crazy. When we heard a commotion in the front of the store. Now, the thing of it was that the deli was right at the front, just off to one side near the registers, so we were about to get front row seats to this amazing piece of drama. Apparently, a man had decided, 10 to 15 minutes before closing, that he absolutely needed to go to Walmart to shop. However, as he approached the store, he was stopped by AP and told that the store was closing, and that new shoppers would have to wait until after Christmas to do their shopping. His response was to rather loudly complain, "Walmart never closes?" He then barged through and began to argue with AP about how Walmart should not be closed, Walmart never closes, and how this was such a general inconvenience to him. It was this tirade he was spewing to security as he rounded the corner, and I saw him for the first time, and he looked in our direction. I will never forget what he said next, mainly from the tone of his voice, because as we were working and he was throwing his grown-up tantrum, he loudly proclaimed, "Even the deli is closed. Why the fuck is the deli closed?" He said as if we had the audacity to not remain open as to cater to his whim. I just gave a look that said basically, hey, we're not the ones who made the schedule or the rules, but we are following what we need to do, and I would like to go home and spend time with my family, my soon-to-be wife and in-laws. I went back to work just as one of my co-workers, Rob, poked his head out from the back where he was doing dishes to see what was going on. The man was stopped from continuing into the store by members of AP as well as management, then escorted out of the store. I like to imagine that he was banned for a time, but I can't be sure because I never asked, and it's been 6 or 7 or so years since. But I keep getting reminded of this man, and how he needed to shop at literally the last minute on Christmas Eve. 2. This happened around 15 years ago when I was in high school. During the summers, my brother and I got jobs working at a Boy Scout camp not far from where we lived. This camp was one of about 6 altogether on one parcel of land that scouts would come to for a week at a time over the course of the summer, from the end of June to about mid-August. Most of the kids were younger and stayed at camps that had kitchens and a dining hall, but 2 of the camps, including the one I worked at, had a commissary where we portioned the ingredients for the meals based on the size of the groups, and the kids would pick it up at designated times, then go back to their campsites and cook. Some of the campers that stayed at our camp throughout the summer were what we called heater stack groups, who would, for most of the week, get hot food that was made at one of the camps with a kitchen and get to eat that. Most of the groups who did this were younger kids who were transitioning from the kitchen camps to the commissary camps, or groups that were doing camping experience for the first time. A lot of the groups came here from more urban areas, so I don't know how much camping they did outside of the week they came down to these camps. The one night they didn't get a prepared meal for dinner was Thursdays, when they would do what was called a foil dinner. For those who don't know, a foil dinner is a pretty low-key meal, where you basically wrap all the ingredients in aluminium foil and put them over a fire to cook. We gave the kids and their parents and chaperones ground beef, potatoes, carrots, gravy mix, and a few other things that, when you combine it all, basically makes something almost like a pot roast, similar to what you would do in a crock pot at home, only over about 20 minutes instead of a day. For dessert, they had apples and raisins and some other ingredients to do a sort of candied apple thing, again by wrapping it in foil and baking it over the fire for a bit. It's pretty easy to do. Not a lot of complicated steps or prep, and everything's portioned out ahead of time. It's a good kind of meal for kids to get a sense of cooking out, especially if it's their first time camping. Pretty much every group of heater stack kids I ever had come through knew this was part of the experience. I didn't really deal with the administration side of things, but I'm sure it was in the information they received about the camp beforehand, and they would have been given instructions on how to prepare their meal. So it's not like we just gave them the ingredients and let them fly blind from there, and most didn't have a problem with it, or at least not one they raised with me. Except for this one guy, which is why we're here. So this group was pretty small, only 4 people all told, 3 kids and 1 adult. And they'd signed up for the heater stack because I think this was their first time coming to any of these camps, and, with having such a small group, they wanted to kind of ease into it. So Thursday comes and the kids come get their food, and they're confused by the fact that there's no hot food. We, my brother and I, explain to them that it's a foil dinner night, and they take the stuff and leave. They were the last group to pick up their food, so my brother and I set about closing the commissary for the evening. The last steps of which were sweeping and mopping the floor. We'd alternate who had to do which task each day, and that day I swept and my brother mopped after I was done. While I was waiting for him to finish so we could leave, a guy walks up to the commissary and into the small office at the front where I was waiting. I ask if I can help him, and he tells me he's with the heater stack group and wants to know where his hot food is. I explained to him that it was foil dinner night and the kids were supposed to cook dinner tonight, to which he replied, "We don't want a foil dinner, we're heater stack." I apologized and explained that was what we always give to the heater stack groups on Thursdays. The camps with kitchens do this for their kids on Thursdays too, so there wasn't any hot food for him at those camps either, and that there was nothing I could do about it. He huffed for a little bit and stormed off. I assumed to help the kids make dinner. Or he may have gone and complained to someone else, I don't know. All I know is he left me alone. They got their hot food again the next day, Friday, and left with the other groups on Saturday. Those kids and that guy never came back either. At least, not to the camp where I worked. And I was there for a few summers after that. 3. This happened 10 years ago, and all the names have been changed. My name for this story is Larissa. Not my real name. I used to work for a money exchange company with a front store and office in the heart of the city center. The store had 4 stories, and we would often host training sessions there. Because of this, we had company-branded mugs, and us in the store staff had our own mugs. I noticed that people would use my personal mug, despite the amount of company mugs available. I don't like sharing my mug with people, but I will with people I am close with. I do not with those I don't know. I don't know their hygiene levels, and it stresses my inner germaphobe out. I remember seeing a visiting member of staff drinking from my cup once, and they just shrugged and said it was clean and there, so they used it. Rude, but okay. I moaned about it to my gorgeous caring friend who, for my birthday, gave me a one-of-a-kind mug especially for me. She probably got tired of me bitching about it. I bring my new mug into work and return my other generic one back home. There is no way anyone could mistake this as available for public use, right? Wrong. Cue Tom. He was a blonde, cocky SOB who had to be the loudest in the room and was such an attention seeker. Those big buckle types, always talking about how detail-oriented he was and blah, blah, blah. I came into the staff room one day, found out they were visiting. Left as it was crowded. When I left, he was rifling through the cupboards. At this point, we had moved all the in-house staff mugs to a separate cupboard to avoid issues, as this had caused friction before. There were about 30 company-branded ones, so no reason for anyone to use personal mugs. I returned and noticed he had once again used my mug. The staff room was quieter, but still busy, maybe 10 people or so, including Tom and I. The awkward interaction was as follows. Hey, are all the company mugs being used? No. Okay, so why are you using one of the personal mugs? It was the first mug I grabbed. This was most likely a lie, but I can't prove it. Use one of the company mugs. Those are ours for personal use. We brought them from home. These are company covers, so I don't see what the issue is. I came in and I grabbed a mug. Okay, but we have company logo mugs for a reason. Use one of those and put that one back. At this point, I was pissed. Tom, with a cocky grin on his face, takes a sip from my mug and says, I don't know what your issue is. It's not like the mug has your name on it. Actually, I think you'll find it does. I pointed the mug. He's clearly baffled. What do you mean? It literally has my name on it, look. I pointed the mug, and in huge red lettering it says Larissa. This is where it got very interesting. One of my colleagues started laughing. They know why I got that mug, because it happened to me so many times before, hence my name on it. His face went red like a tomato, and you could see him sweating from embarrassment. Serves him right for trying to be a condescending SOB. Not sure how you missed it, considering you're so detail-oriented. The writing is huge and in red. Please pour your drink into another mug. I'd like a cup of tea, and I want to use my mug. I've never seen anyone pour a drink and hightail it out of somewhere so fast. What made it worse is that afterwards everyone in the company somehow found out, and people started making jokes about hiding their stuff. They did this because he would do this everywhere he went, drink from someone's mug on purpose and claim it was an accident. I only found this out afterwards when news of the incident did the rounds. Fact is, his cockiness made me want to expose him. Also made him look like an idiot. Going forward, he only ever drank from company logo mugs, but someone always reminded him of the incident. 4. So I went to a local urgent care facility recently, and it's a pretty small clinic on a good day, but the day this happened they were closing early, and it was an hour until closing, so most of the staff was gone. There was one nurse practitioner and 2 nurses on staff. Let me start this story. I was getting checked in at the reception, and there was an old man sitting in the waiting room. He was the only one in there. While the nurse was checking me in, the nurse practitioner came up and asked to talk with her for a minute. They stepped to the side in the reception desk area when I overheard their conversation. The nurse practitioner had a customer service smile. She looks like she's concealing rage, which is not like her at all. Hey, nurse, can you run a prescription for... And she gave a list of 5 medications for the C19, which she said the word of the sickness, so there was no mistaking it. Pharmacy an hour away. I know that the pharmacy doesn't usually carry some of these medications, but Karen insisted that they do, and she absolutely refuses to go anywhere else. The nurse responds, I can call, but I already know the pharmacy won't have those medications. Thank you. The nurse practitioner went back in with the Karen. I know it was Karen because she was the only patient back there, and while I was waiting to be checked on, Karen came back out the back, and the polite old gentleman stood up, and both started to walk out when I overheard their conversation. So what did they say? What's wrong? Karen, while taking her mask off, putting it up while she was talking. Oh, they said I just had the flu. I'll be fine. Oh, that's great. Let's go home. Karen then proceeded to walk out of the clinic and get in the car with the polite old gentleman, without her mask while talking the whole time. I'm not someone who gets involved in people's personal lives, but The polite old gentleman looked at least 70 years old, and I feel that he'll probably catch the virus from Karen. And she wouldn't even wear a mask after getting told that she had the virus. She acted super entitled, and got my favorite nurse practitioner angry. And I would like to reiterate that she is one of the nicest, most patient, gentle and forgiving people I've ever met in my life. So it makes me wonder how bad she was acting to get her visibly upset. 5. I was previously in the military for 3.5 years. My job in simple terms was an artillery observer. We do a lot more than just observe artillery, but I can spare you a long, detailed description of what I actually did. The story really starts where my military career did. I've always been a big guy, so getting in wasn't easy, and staying in was even harder. By that I mean the military has weight standards, and I was constantly towing the line, or over the line, to the point I was verbally and mentally abused. The first half of my time I spent working with 06-03 officer grades, in the battalion and brigade artillery section, all very boring details. I say this to emphasize the fact that I was far more advanced than any other junior enlisted person or junior non-commissioned officers in my brigade. When I was new, I showed up, and within a week we had a certification for job knowledge and vehicle identification. I scored highest of all the enlisted in my battery. This helped me in the battle with retention, but also helped me advance further. I was doing the job of an E6 while I was E3 and 4. I continued to excel, and eventually I was diagnosed with a permanent knee injury and was given medical paperwork that outlined what was and wasn't safe for me to do. Any more knee damage could lead to an early medical retirement. I really honestly did the best I could, even when I was in pain. This is where the toxicity really begins to break through. I was moved from my position at the battalion level to a new position in one of our companies. We were stretched pretty thin, and the platoon was being split up and sent on different missions in different countries throughout Europe. I was attached to B-Co, and we split off from the rest of the platoon. In a normal mechanized fire support team, Beefist, you have a vehicle, driver, gunner, NCO, E6, lieutenant, O2, and 3 forward observers, dismounts, and 3 radio operators for the observers. When I got to B-Co, we had a gunner, a driver, and an E5. The E5 is the villain of this story. We'll call him John. John was a 35-year-old man who decided he needed to join the army before it was too late. John was college educated, didn't seem like it, but allegedly he was. He and I joined the army around the same time, a 2-month difference. He was able to enlist as an E4 because of his degree and waited patiently for 18 months so he could go to school and become an E5. A big part of our job was to be a subject matter expert to assist the commander with decisions and planning. We are an advisor to him or her. John, however, couldn't pass the certification because he thought he was smarter than he is. We were told he was waiting to retest, but the battalion trusted him with all the planning. The longer I worked with him, the more I realized this guy was a fucking idiot. He more than once told me if I didn't have a paper copy of my medical papers, he was going to force me to break it, which he would be technically allowed to do, but we had limited access to internet, and our platoon sergeant told him I was to abide by the restrictions because I knew them. But he was a big man and had to prove his authority. He belittled me in front of everyone because I wouldn't run. Stipulation of papers, I wasn't allowed to run on consecutive days. He knew I couldn't run, but he thought he could bully me into it. This happened many times. He would bum Copenhagen off me, and I knew how to order it online. He had signed and was responsible for all the equipment we had taken with us. Guns, night vision, everything down to the screwdriver we used to fix our vehicle. He had somehow lost the slings for our guns. I had placed a big order on Amazon with personal items and such. I asked anyone if they needed anything. He mentioned the slings. I found some for cheap that were nice. I ordered them at his request. We got the slings, and he avoided the talk of payment for about a month, so I took the slings and put them with my stuff. He privately told me he would get me in trouble if I didn't return the slings. I said I haven't been paid. He tried to say he had been buying me beer on organized beer days. I know he wasn't buying it because I know the person who actually bought it. I folded because the $25 slings weren't worth getting hemmed up over. We stored all of our equipment in the armory. One night after being in the field, we come back. It's about 11 p.m. He refused to let us lock everything in our lockboxes in the armory because the inventory lists wouldn't reflect what was in the boxes. He argued he would be forced to rewrite the inventory lists that night. The first sergeant told him he was wrong. Eventually, we got a new lieutenant. We'll call him Sir. Sir was for the boys, and he was actually in charge and knew his shit. One night, we're all going through certification questions. I have never gotten anything less than a 98% on a cert test. John rambles off a question that is the most entry-level basic question we ask brand new guys when they show up. I tell him word for word what the textbook answer is. He refused to believe me. It had something to do with the target numbers, immediate suppression, and corrections to fire. John went so far as to ask Sir the answer, and when Sir told him the same thing, we showed him the book. He refused to be wrong. So then I justifiably wrecked his world when I started asking him questions. He got so fed up he just went to sleep. A tip for all new leaders: before you start acting all big and bad like you're God's gift to the earth, stop and assess your subordinates. Don't assume you know more. It's better to be thought a silent fool than open your mouth and prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Idiots in the Wild, episode 100. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Please do boop the like button before you go, and share the video with friends and family. Thank you kindly. Okay, I don't think there's any other business, so let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is... And shout out to Ninde Khalathil for this one. If you could take the place of any movie character, who would it be and why? I'm going to pick the dude from The Big Lebowski, because it didn't matter what went wrong in his life, he would always be chill and find a way to remain calm, relaxed, and happy. If he was stressed out, he didn't remain stressed out for long. And I like to not be stressed out. Perhaps you have more interesting and adventurous answers, and I'd love to see them in a comment below. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.